Okay, I think I got it going here. We'll find out. So you're all here for the APA instruction. All right. Well, I'm Professor Hensley, and it's nice to see you all. I know it's been a treacherous day for most of us. I certainly slid right in here, and I did not enjoy myself at all. But here we are. So I am going to go over a few basic tips for writing an APA. And I turn my microphone so I'm not screaming. So I know that APA can seem kind of daunting and hard and confusing, especially when you've been taught MLA, which is what most of our English department teaches here, and I understand that. So I've been teaching here full time for 12 years, and before that I was an adjunct. And in that time, I have noticed that APA still is somewhat of a mystery to people, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, pretty much social science and nursing are the two departments that require APA. Not a lot of others do, but that being said, if you're taking a psychology or a sociology class, you got to know how to do it. And so I wanted to do, and I've done this a couple of times throughout, the time I've been here, give you just a couple of tips, because a new edition of the formatting guide came out in 2020, in October 2019, I believe. But so it actually changed a lot of things for student papers that makes it easier for you. Thank goodness, right? Because, yeah. So reading through what the changes were for students, I was like, dang, I wish I'd done that when I was in grad school. My life would have been a whole lot easier if I'd had that option. So, excuse me. So I've adapted the Purdue OWL's presentation. Purdue OWL is the online writing lab at Purdue University. It is free to anyone. So if you don't know about the OWL, get to know the OWL. It is amazing. Again, another thing I wish I would have had when I was in graduate school. It has both MLA and APA, and even Chicago style, if one of your philosophy professors wants you to write Chicago style. But it has shortcuts, it has hints, it has examples. If you don't want to invest the $30 or whatever it is to get the APA book. If you are going to be in a major that requires APA beyond here at Vincennes University, I highly recommend that you just invest in the APA manual and have it. I still have mine from grad school, and that was 2 editions ago. So the APA book, it looks like this. It's the 7th edition of the publication manual. You can get it in a regular book or in a spiral bound. I have the spiral bound version, which makes it easier to kind of flip it over. It has everything. Literally, I call this, which is probably sacrilegious, but I call this the APA Bible. This is everything you need to know to write an APA format, and I use it all the time. So my brain has limited capacity for remembering things, and so I go reference this book all the time just to make sure that I still have it correct in my head. Okay. Last time I checked, we had it at our bookstore. I don't know if we still do, but you can get it on Amazon, like I said, for $30 or less, and it will serve you well while you're writing. So the first thing you need to know, and I get this question a lot, can I use I or we in a research paper in APA? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. And this is one of the big changes that was made with the new version, because that has never been the case before, that you could use I or we. And again, it just makes it easier for students, and it makes it easier to read too. So generally, it would be if you were writing about an experiment that you had done, you could say, I conducted this experiment. But even in some cases in your research papers, you have to give your opinion, especially if you're writing a critical thinking paper here at VU, you have that student position part where you give your opinion. So I is okay now in APA papers. And you want to talk about things, it's not conversational, but you want to talk about it as if it's happening. Like you're telling somebody a story. So when you write about whatever you're writing about, think of it as you're telling somebody a story, and you want to be concise, you want to be clear, but you want to be understood. You don't have to get into all the fancy dancy words and try to be all, well, such and such did this and such did. No, just we did this. This is what this person said. This is what this person said, and just be active about it, as if you're telling somebody a story. And again, this is a change. This is a change from what most of us as professors were taught when we learned APA, because it's an update from 2019. So I think in a way it's just making them a little less formal, and it makes it a whole lot easier to read. So like I said, be clear, concise, use simple language, don't get all fancy. It's not necessary unless you just feel like being fancy, but you don't have to. And at least from my perspective, the papers that I assign are pretty cut and dry as far as, here's your topic. What do you think? What does the literature say? That kind of stuff. So as long as you just tell me what you think, but also you're not going to want to use like the same words that you would use if you're talking to your friends. So be professional about it. You're not going to want to use curse words or, text slang or anything like that when you're writing a research paper, but just be clear. So, and believe me, I've seen texting kind of words in a research paper. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. Okay. Anytime you're doing a research paper at Vincennes University, for the most part, you are going to be doing a literature review. At this level in your college education, you're doing a literature review. So basically what you're doing is you're going to, most of you probably are just getting on the internet, going to Google or going to Google Scholar, which is a much better choice, and finding articles or books or websites about whatever it is that you're going to write your paper about. That is a literature review. And it's very common. What we consider a research paper is a literature review. You're not doing your own experiment and then reporting on it. We don't generally do that at this level of undergraduate work. And so what you're doing then is just kind of reviewing what else is out there and putting it into one paper. Now that sounds very simple. I know it's not that easy. Believe me, I know. And you spend hours and hours and hours looking for this information and compiling it all together and that kind of thing. So when you're doing your paper, I'm going to give you this. This is hint number one that I actually don't have on the PowerPoint. I probably should put it on there. Hint number one, as you're finding your sources, whatever, wherever you're finding them, have either a word processing window open or have a notebook and paper there. Jot down what it is. Is it a book? Is it a website? Is it a journal article? Where did you find it? Because all of that is going to come back to be necessary information. And what I find that students do is they may jot down the website, but even if they go back, it's not the same as it was when they looked at it the first time. Take a screenshot, whatever, but keep a running tab of what it is you've looked at and what kind of information it is. And I'll tell you how to figure that out as we go along, but that's hint number one. So with a literature review or with the research papers that we generally do at this level, you don't have a specific format. So the APA formatting is actually for publication. So if you're going to do an experiment or something and write an article and then have it published in a journal, that's mostly what this manual is for. But it does give you some criteria for citing your papers. So for the most part, unless your professor tells you otherwise, your paper will have an introduction. It'll have kind of a thesis statement, but that's kind of up to your professor. Basically, what you found out, and then your list of references. Okay, so it's not, you're not necessarily going to have tables or graphs or charts or anything like that in these papers, not usually. Okay, so if your essay is not a literature review, then you need to contact your professor and talk to them about it. I would venture to say that 99% of the time they are, but in that case, if you're like, I'm not really sure what they're asking me to do here, then find out. I promise your professor will not kill you for asking the question, do you want this written as a literature review? Because then that determines how you format. So if they say, well, no, I want you to write it more like this, then you need to get in the book and look and see exactly how they want you to do that. But like I said, 99% of the time in the freshman and sophomore world, you're going to be doing the literature review. Okay. Questions so far? No? Well, you haven't run out of the room screaming yet, so we must be doing okay. Okay. All right. No matter what, your paper should be typed, obviously. With electronic stuff now, everything's typed. Double spaced. This is important. Think about it this way. Your professors are probably, in their 40s or 50s. Single space is hard to read, especially with bifocals. So double space and have 1-inch margins all the way around. That is a standard APA format. So top, bottom, left and right margins, 1 inch. I had a professor in grad school who would we turned ours in we printed them out and gave them to him, but he would get a ruler out and measure our margins to make sure they were 1 inch. He was kind of mean. And then I generally say use a 12-point font just because it's easier to read. APA says 10 or 12 is acceptable. Go with the 12 just to make it easier for your professor to read, and use either Times New Roman or Arial font because they are standard and they are, again, easier to read. If you have to print your paper out, then you just print it on standard 8.5 by 11 paper. And I don't know how other professors do it, at least for my classes, they're all turned in on Blackboard, so you don't have to print anything out. But 1-inch margins is a big deal because if you use Microsoft Word, the default is 1-inch margins on the top and the bottom and 1.25 inches on the left and the right. So you have to go in and change it. So always make sure that you've got your margins set correctly. And it makes a difference if your professor gives you a page length, like you have to have 8 pages or 9 pages, the bigger your margins are, the more pages you use. And so you're kind of cheating if you have bigger than 1-inch margins. And believe me, we notice. We see them enough. Every page, now this is where things get different than MLA, all right? They get really different. Every single page should have a number on it. Okay, so you can see here that I have an example there that the Purdue OWL did, but then I added to it. So in a student paper, all you need is this page number right here. Okay, you do not need what we call a running head, this over here. You don't need that anymore. Believe me, be grateful, because it was a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt to format. And if you, depending on which program you used, it was all kind of wonky. So all you have to have is a page number, and you can program that in so that it just automatically does it for you. So every word processing program gives you that option. to add a page number, always in the upper right-hand corner, and it will just automatically do it for you. Okay, but that's big, okay? Not your last name and a page number, not the title and a page number, just the page number. And I know other formats do it differently. Okay, so when you're putting your paper together, you're going to have a title page. MLA does not have a title page. APA does. You have a title page, which is page 1. You're going to put 1 on this as the page number. Then you may or may not have an abstract. You're going to have to ask your professor what they want. An abstract is like a blurb. I always call it the blurb on the back of the book. You know, they used to be, you know, you picked up a book and you looked at the back, it told you about it. That's what an abstract is. But we generally only use those for long papers or for more professional papers than a literature review. So like for my classes, I don't require an abstract because the papers aren't long enough for it. But ask your professor if they want one. If they do, that's page 2. If they don't, then the first page of the paper itself would be page 2, which is that main body. And then you keep going on from there until you get to the reference page, and the reference page is whatever the next page is after you're done. Okay, so I would recommend that you always ask your professor if they want an abstract or not. If it's not specifically written in the instructions, ask that question. Do you require an abstract? Okay. And if you take my classes, the answer is no, you're good. Okay. Come on in. Yes. So an abstract would be like a summary of your paper. In this paper, you're going to read about blah, 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 blah. And it's no more than 200 words. So it's like a paragraph. And it's just a summation. So if you go online to look at articles, the abstract's what's going to come up first. So you can read it, get the inside of what it is and decide if you want to look further. So, but like I said, most of the time, that's not something we would do at this level. So my master's thesis had an abstract, but it was 68 pages long. So, yeah. Oh, that's nothing. 68? Yeah. It took me a year to write it. So yeah, it did. Okay, your title page. Now, this is going to be the same no matter what paper you're writing. Your title page will always be formatted like this. Okay, obviously, you got the page number up here. Page 1 is your title page. Then you're going to have the title of it. You have to give your paper a title. Critical thinking paper is not a title. Be creative. Immigration in the United States is a title. Critical thinking paper is not. My UCC rough draft is not a title. Okay. So give it a title. You are going to, when you get into your title page, you're going to hit enter like 3 times. That's the best rule of thumb, is to hit enter 3 times. So it brings your title down away from the top a little bit. You're going to write your title and make it bold and centered. You're going to hit enter again twice so that you have a gap. All right. Then you're going to put your name. Please put your name on your paper. Put your name. The rest of this is not in bold, but it is centered. And yes, it's nitpicky. And yes, it's necessary. All right. So you're going to put your name centered. Underneath that, you're going to put whatever academic department you're writing the paper for. So if you're writing a paper for me, it would be sociology department, comma, Vincennes University. Obviously, you kind of have to figure out where. Then you're going to put the course name that you're writing it for. So for me, it would be SOCL 245 with a colon, cultural diversity. Whatever the course name is that you're writing the paper for is the next thing. Then your professor's name. And you probably want to make sure what your professor's title is. I am not Dr. Hensley. I don't have a doctorate degree. So for me, it would just be Professor Jennifer Hensley or just Jennifer Hensley. I've had people give me the title of doctor. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't have to go through more graduate work, but that's not my title. So make sure you know what your professor's title is. And then the date that the paper is due is the last one. Okay. Now, if you're turning your paper in early, then use that date. That's okay. Whatever date you turn it in is the date that you put down here. So title, bold, centered, extra space, not bold, but centered, your name, the department you're writing it for, the course you're writing it for, the professor you're writing it for, and the date you're turning it in. That's it. Nothing else goes on this page. Nothing. So you have a couple of choices then. Once you get to the end of what you're putting on your title page, you can either hit enter over and over and over again until you get to the next page. Or if you're using Microsoft Word and I think Google Docs does the same thing, you can go up and click on Insert Page Break, and it'll automatically kick you down to the next page. Either way. If you use Page Break, the cool thing about that is it won't pull anything up into that bottom part of it. So it makes it cleaner for you, but that's up to you. So either hit enter until you get to the next page or insert a page break and let it jump you down to the next one. Are we good? Okay. All right. If you have to have an abstract, this is what it would look like. I'm not going to get into all of this because generally you won't need one, but you would not need this over here. You just need the page number, the name abstract, bolded, centered, and then you do not have an indentation for a paragraph in your abstract here. Again, if that's something that your professor wants you to have, and if you're confused about it, get a hold of me. I'll help you figure that out, okay? So then the next step, now you've got your title page done. And we're going to pretend like you didn't have to do an abstract. So now you're actually going to start typing your paper. Woohoo, finally, okay? So the first line of the first page of your paper, which is page 2, will have your title again at the top of the page, centered and bold. The page number should automatically just be put in there. You should not be typing a page number on every page. You should format it so that it automatically does that for you. So, and I'm going to show you an example here in just a second. Always double spaced, and in between paragraphs, don't add an extra space. Just keep going, okay? And then you're going to identify any of your sources through in-text citations, which we'll get to in just a second, okay? So here's one example, and I'm going to blow it up for you too. So when you look at, make sure, yeah, okay. So here you go. Here's your page number. Automatically formatting the page number, page 2. Title of the paper, in bold at the top, first line. And then you start typing your paper, okay? Double spaced, no extra break here between this. So you got your title, you got double spacing keeps going, and then right here is one example of your in-text citations. Again, this is a little different than MLA, and we'll get to that here in a little bit, but that's how one way that can look. Anytime you use information that somebody else wrote, you need to cite your source. Otherwise, you can be accused of plagiarism. Plagiarism is a pretty serious offense in the academic world, and so you don't want that to happen. You do not have to cite every single sentence, but you do need to cite more than just at the end of the paragraph. especially if you use quotes or statistics. If you're using any kind of numbers, 14% of the population, blah, 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 blah. Well, you didn't just make that up. You got that somewhere. You need to give credit where credit is due and say, okay, according to the US Census Bureau, or 14%, and then put the Census Bureau. That way your reader knows that you have done the research and knows where to go find it if they want more information. I cannot stress enough how important it is to cite your sources in your paper. It is beyond important. You can get kicked out of a university for plagiarism, okay? So just don't do it. Just don't do that. And you should be fine. Okay, so this would be page 2. Obviously, the first page, you're getting started, you're talking about things, you're introducing your topic, and then you're getting into it. And it should flow like this. Yes.
So if we're doing an abstract, we don't indent.
Right.
But we do indent.
You do indent in a regular paper, just like you would in any other paper. The abstract is the only exception to that. Yes, good question. Mm-hmm. Let me grab a drink real quick. All right, now this is where things get hazy. That seems like a good word, hazy. In APA format, we have a references page, not a works cited page. We do not call it works cited. We call it references. And again, I know it's nitpicky. Believe me, I know it's nitpicky. However, it is the way that it is. All right, so your reference page is a new page. So let's say, you finish writing your paper, you're at, 3/4 of the way down on page 5. You're gonna hit page break or enter to get to the next page. And at the very top, just like your title on page 2, on your reference page, references goes on the first line, centered and bolded. Now, this is where things get tricky, hazy, whatever. Depending on the type of source that you have, your reference lines, the actual lines themselves, will be different. And this is why people really hate APA, because it changes things. First thing you need to know, when you are doing your reference page, the first line will go all the way over to the left. Any other line that goes down to the next one gets indented. Here's how you do that. You go up into paragraph or into format, and you go into indentation. In Microsoft Word, you click paragraph and it comes up, and you want a hanging indentation, which means that the first line will be all the way over, and then every line after that will indent for you. Makes your life a whole lot easier. You're not hitting tab and trying to. Don't drive yourself crazy, okay? Go to paragraph, go to indentation, hanging indentation, 1/2 inch or whatever, standard is fine. And that's how you end up with this. And it's all very even and lovely, and we like it that way, okay? Your reference page should be in alphabetical order by last name of the reference. Or if you don't have a last name like this one, American Association of University Professors, then that's okay, because it still starts with an A. So alphabetical order is important. And that's just the way they do it, is to put them in alphabetical order. If you have hyperlinks, if you have a web page, if you got it from some electronic source, which most of the time you do, then you're going to want to have the link in there, which is a big change. And I've had to readjust my thinking on that, because you didn't used to do that. But then that allows the reader to click directly from your paper and go to your source. So I can tell you by looking, this first one is a book. Well, it's a journal article. And then you've got different volumes of things. And your professor may give you some parameters. I know for one of my classes, The sources have to either be from before 1999 or after 2014. And so you need to be sure that you're looking at the dates depending on what, what your professor requires. So if we pull this up a little bit bigger, there's references, here's your hanging indentation, there's your URL or your hyperlink. And most of the time in most programs, when you paste in a hyperlink and hit enter, it'll automatically make it a link. But if it doesn't, you can right click and hit insert link and then paste it in there. So like this one didn't get the hyperlink in it for some reason. So you just need to make sure that you do. All right, so when we are doing the reference page, and I'm going to go back here, you can see that we have the last name and then a comma and then the first initial. You do that for all authors if it's a person, okay? If they have two initials, you do the two initials. So if it was me, it'd be Hensley, comma, J period, A period. And when you're looking at the source, whatever author is listed first is the first in your list. And basically that boils down to anytime an article or a book is published, the person who did the most work on it is listed first. It's kind of a pride thing in a way. So give them first dibs on your paper. So in this particular case, N. Ambati and R. Rosenthal wrote this article. And obviously this person got the credit first, so they were listed first, which then that's the alphabetical order it goes in. So if it is not a person, like this one, American Association of University Professors, that's an organization, you don't have to reverse that. So you just put it like it is. It's only if it's a person with first and last name that you reverse it. Is that clear? I just make sure that, and sometimes you don't always know. Sometimes you got to look for who wrote the article, and it becomes tricky sometimes to find that out. But generally, if someone has written an article, they're going to put their name on it somewhere. You just may have to scroll way down to the bottom to find it, depending on where you're looking. Okay, so we got that part, last name, comma, first initial period, middle initial period, if there is one. If a name is hyphenated, then, if it's Janice Vantlin Jones, then it would be Vantlin hyphen Jones, comma, Janice. So just don't make it too hard, but pay attention to it. The other thing with the reference page that throws a lot of people off is what to capitalize and what to not capitalize, because we have been told our whole lives that when you have a title of something, a title of a book or a title of a newspaper, you capitalize everything. That's not the case in APA format anymore. So when you're doing the title part of the reference page, you capitalize the first letter of the title and then any proper nouns. So if you look here we've got the authors, last name, first initial. We've got the year it was published right here. And then the title, Relationship Knowledge and Attitude About Fast Food with Obesity on Teenagers, period. That's the title of their article. The only thing that's capitalized is the first letter. Now, if they had talked about, American teenagers, American would be capitalized. All right. So you got to be careful about that kind of stuff. Again, I know it's nitpicky. It's the way they do it. So, and that's one of the things that I notice, and I don't get, okay, for me, in a rough draft, I don't get worked up about this stuff because most people don't know, and I'll make corrections, but in the final draft, I expect it to be correct. That's just a hint for my papers, but that's how you do it properly. Then, if it is a journal article, so if you've gotten something out of the American Medical Journals or the Journal of Sexual Orientation or whatever, the name of the journal is capitalized just like you would normally capitalize the title of anything, but you put it in italics with a comma. Then you have the volume number, which is also in italics. And then you have the issue number, which is in parentheses, that is not in italics. Now we're getting really nitty gritty here with a comment, and then the pages that it takes up in that journal. All of that information will be found usually at the top of the article. But we're going to practice too. So, all right. So this is a very typical journal article entry. And most of the time, this is what you're going to use. Most of the time, at the 1 and 200 level of college, you're not reading an entire book to use as your reference. You might be reading a chapter or part of a chapter, and there's a way to do that, but most of the time you're going to be looking at articles from JSTOR or oh, I can't think of what the other ones are, but we'll get to that. Okay, so how do you know? This is what I told you at the beginning. Tip number 1, keep a note about it. Okay, I went, like today, I was looking up something on the Census Bureau. And so to cite that, I would have put, United States Census Bureau, because that's the author. And I would put, the website that I found it on. And in fact, I was downloading articles from that. So then I would have put even more information on there. Is it a book? Is it your textbook? Maybe. If you're using your textbook, you need to cite that source. Is it something that you're finding in a news? Maybe you found an article in the New York Times. Okay, that's a newspaper article. Let's say you found an article on The Onion. Would you use that? No. The Onion is a satire site. It is not news. It is not real. Don't use that. You got to make sure you know what your sources are like and make sure that they are factual and true. No pressure. Again, I know it's a lot. Luckily for you, Purdue OWL has all kinds of examples that you can use when you figure out what you've got. And they'll all be a little bit different. But if you've got, a book that's in its first edition, you write it one way. If you've got a book in its 15th edition, you write it a different way. But Purdue OWL will give you all of that information for free. And this is where I feel like I need to stop and say, please, please, please do not use an automatic formatting program. I know it's tempting. I know it is, and they're pretty cool, but they are never right. Ever right. Okay. We know when you have used a program that automatically format your crap for you, we know, because it's not right. And it makes this weird thing in Word, and it's just don't do it. I know it's tempting, but don't, because you will get it wrong. Okay. Okay. I'm going to turn off my microphone. I'm going to hand you something real quick. We're going to practice. Oh, wait. Sorry. Okay, so I have given you all the information that you would find. I actually just went and looked this one up and took a picture of the information. How would you cite this in your reference page? We're just working on the British Journal of General Practice now. Okay, so who's the author? Who's the author of this article? Joseph Anthony, right. So you would write it as Anthony, comma, J, period, right? So, because you're going to reverse that. So it'd be Anthony, comma, J, period, then a space, and then 2015 in parentheses with a period after. That's when it was published. And then the title of the article is BJGP Student Writing Competition, the results. And so here's the title of the article right here. Now, they didn't capitalize the, but we do because it's after a colon. Standard English would do that. So we would write it like that, and then a period. And it's in the British Journal of General Practice, which is in italics, which I know you can't handwrite italics, but you know what I mean. It is issue 65, volume 636, pages 361 to 362. And this one, instead of a website address like an HTTP, www dot, this one gives you a DOI, a digital object identifier. If your article has one, use it. Seriously, it makes life so much easier for people. So if and most articles from 2018 and up have a DOI. And so instead of putting the www dot, you would just put the DOI, make it a web address. So it's right here. I just copied and pasted it, essentially. So then what I can do is I can click on that, and it thinks for a little while. And it takes me right to the article. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Does this make sense? Think we got this one? Okay, so let's try the next one. All right, this is the book I use for cultural diversity. So it's a book now. It's not going to be that much different. And sorry, it's kind of blurry. It's the 15th, 15th edition. And that kind of got a little blurry. So you always start with the author's name. So you go with the author's name, Schaefer, comma, RT, because it's Richard T. The most recent publication date that's on there, which is 2021. The name of the book, instead of the title of the article, it's the title of the book, is in italics, again with just the first word capitalized. And because this is an edition, it's the 15th edition, you would put that in there because obviously there are 14 others that you could have used. And then all you have to do is put the publisher's name. You used to have to put a whole much more stuff on there, but you don't now. So this one will not have a web address because it's a book. So it's a little more simpler. That's really bad English. It's a little more simple. Let me try that again. To do books. So if you used your textbook for your paper, this is how you would do it. Whatever textbook you have, whatever class we're talking about. So luckily for us anymore, the publisher puts their name right there on the front. You used to have to really search for it. But like on the inside, on the main page, it's always there too. Okay. All right, one more. You got one more on the back. This is a website. So I went to the Mayo Clinic website, which is still considered a credible site. It's still something you can use. I wouldn't rely 100% on it, but you can use it. And so when you're looking at a website that does not have an actual author, so this is not written by somebody by name, it's written by the Mayo Clinic staff. So they must have agreed that, nobody gets individual credit on it. They're just going to do it as staff. So they are the authors, though. Mayo Clinic staff is the author. But there's no date. There's no date of publication. Oh no, what do I do? It's okay. You just put a lowercase n period d period for no date. It's okay. Web pages are going to be a lot of NDs on those. It's okay. Don't worry. Then you put the seasonal affective disorder, which is what the title of the article is. Just like it is. So see, it's got seasonal affective disorder here with the SAD in the parentheses. So I did that exactly the same way down here with a period. Because this did not have a date of publication, and because I know that the Mayo Clinic goes in and updates things every once in a while, but they don't tell you that they've updated it, you put a retrieved date on it. This is the day I got this information. So as of February 20th, 2022, this was what this article said. But February 20, 2023, it may say something else. We don't know. So that's why if it doesn't have a date, you're best to put when you got the information. And then, of course, where you got it from, the website. And so basically, I just copied this up here and pasted it there and made it a link. Okay. Those are the three most common types of sources that you'll see in a literature review. Obviously, there are some others, but those are the most common. And so you have to tweak it depending on what you're using, and you can keep those for your reference if you want to. You can also find these are my examples. These aren't the Purdue OWL examples, but you can find those examples on Purdue OWL. So, but hang on to the paper because we're going to do something else with it real quick. Okay. How are we doing with reference page? Honestly, the reference page and the in-text citations are the most important part. It's way more important than the title page. It's way more important than the page numbers, because it gives the reader the information that they need to make sure that what you said is accurate. Okay. Okay. So then let's move on, because I don't want to keep you much later than noon. Let's move on to in-text citations. So you're going along, you're writing your paper, you're like, oh, the Mayo Clinic said this about seasonal affective disorder, blah, 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 whatever it is. So you're going to put that in your paper next to, either at the end of, or at the beginning of, or in the middle of the sentence. Okay, so up here, the blue is an example. So maybe in the paper it says research suggests that the Purdue OWL is a good resource for students. That information was found in an article written by Atkins in 2018. So then I know, as the reader, I can go to their reference page, find Atkins in 2018, click on that source, and go and read it for myself. That's why it's important. Okay, so you can do it that way, or you can do it. This is what they call a parenthetical citation. Don't worry about that, but where it's in parentheses. This is called a narrative citation, where just the date is in parentheses. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's just however you like the flow in your paper. So if you do it this way, and instead of saying research suggests, it says Atkins suggests, that's fine. Then you just put the date next to Atkins in the parentheses. Sometimes when you're starting a sentence with the author, this is the best way to do it. But it always, like if you do it at the end, like this one, you put the period after the parentheses. And think about it this way. You want that information, that citation to stick with that sentence. So the period kind of keeps it with that sentence and it's not just floating out here somewhere. I know it's kind of sounds silly, but when you see it typed up, that's how it works. So either way is correct. It does not matter. If you have more than one author of an article, which we don't have for any of our examples, but you would just, let's say it's Atkins and Rosenthal, then it would be Atkins and Rosenthal, comma, 2018, or Atkins and Rosenthal suggest, and you would do it that way, okay? And you would include all of the authors' names up to 3. If there are more than 3 authors, then you don't have to put all of them in there. I've read articles with 10 authors. I'm like, seriously, come on, people. So you don't have to put them all in there in this context, okay? Sometimes you would use a page number. Generally, you're not going to use a page number unless you are using a direct quote, unless you're actually quoting something from the paper, then you'll use the page number. Most of the time we don't do that in APA format, but you can, obviously, and you just add that in there, here or here, either way. If you use a direct quote, you really need to use the page number if you can find one. On a web page, there may not be a page number, and that's okay. Then you just leave it out. All right, so how do we cite this reference in the text? Right, so we know how it's written in our reference page. So in the text, you would either do parenthesis, Anthony, comma, 2015, and parenthesis, period, or first name or the last name Anthony, then the date in the parentheses, and then go on. And again, when I'm grading papers, this is what I'm looking for, because I want to know, okay, you're saying this information is true and you got this information from this article. Well, wait a minute, that article was written in 1972, but you're talking about an issue of 2021. Maybe we should use something a little more updated. Or maybe I'm reading it and I'm saying, okay, and I go to the article, I'm like, man, this is really interesting. I really want to read more about this. Then I'm going to read the article. Okay, but you got to give credit where credit is due, and this is where you do that. This is where you keep yourself from being accused of plagiarism. And when you're doing a literature review, most of the information that you're putting in your paper is not your own, obviously, because you're gathering it from other sources. If you're writing a paragraph from the article this article that you've read, my recommendation, this is not an APA recommendation, but my recommendation is if it's a paragraph, you should cite it at least twice in there, just to keep your reader knowing that you're still using the same source. If you wait till all the way at the end, then I'm not sure where the first couple of sentences came from. So you don't have to do every sentence, but you'll want to keep that reader knowing, okay, this information came from this source. And again, that keeps you out of that plagiarism bubble. So how about this one? Same thing, right? Schaefer, comma, 2021, or the date in the parentheses for that one. And with your in-text citations, only the last name, unless you have 2 authors with the same last name. But that's one of those exceptions that you need to just go look up in the book and see how they want you to do it. Now, what about if there isn't? Remember, the last one we have isn't a person. So you would put Mayo Clinic staff, comma, N period, D period, or Mayo Clinic staff with the apostrophes, no, parentheses, not apostrophes. If there is no author at all, okay? And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you're on a website, history.com does this a lot. So if you're on history.com, it's factual information, but nobody takes credit for it. Then you would use the title as the author. But we try as hard as we can in APA format not to do that. We don't want to use the title of the article as the author if we can help it. So it's kind of the last resort. If you've looked and looked and looked and looked and looked and cannot find an author, then you would use the title. Okay. But again, last resort. Okay. So it's been almost an hour. That is, I've got a couple more things here, but I don't know that it's really much more than we've already talked about. Does anybody have any questions about what the basics, and that is the basics of what we've covered today? Yes. Okay, so the way I generally do it, when I start my reference page, I'll type in references and bold it and hit enter, and I'll format it then. Then I'll go up there to format and I'll do the hanging indent, and then from then on out, it'll do it for me. Does that make sense? You want me to show you? Okay. Okay. Let me see. Software. Okay. So we get that. We bold it. We make it a 12-point font. I like Arial because it's easier for me to read. You want to insert your page number, top of the page over there, close it. Okay, so then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to unbold because I don't want the rest of it bolded. Then I'm going to go up here to paragraph, and over here to special and hanging. Okay, and so then, and then I'm going to left justify because I don't want the references centered, and then oh, well, anyway. But if there were more lines, it would do that. Okay, so then when you hit enter, it's going to start over on that other side again, and then it'll just keep doing it for you as you go down. So that's the way I do it. That way I know I don't have to mess with it anymore. I don't have to go back and highlight or anything like that. So I just do it first thing. Okay. Any other questions? I'll show you the page break I mentioned. So let's pretend this is the title page, even though it's not. And you don't want to hit enter to go down to the next page, which of course you could do. You would come up here to enter, and page break automatically skips you down to the next page, the top of the next page, and puts that page number in there for you. Personally, I really like page break because then if you decide to turn your paper in as a PDF instead of a Microsoft Word or Google Doc, it will stay that way. It's not going to yank your paper back up into a page you didn't want it on. So page break is kind of like a barrier where you can't pop it back up that way. It's a personal thing. I don't know. So I probably should have shared my screen on that with the recording, but I didn't. Sorry. I'll add that in. Any other questions? Well, thank you for, yes.
Earlier when you talked about something that's written by the staff,
Mm-hmm.
I have two where there's not like an author, but it doesn't say written by staff, it just doesn't say anything.
Okay, then you use the title of the, whatever it is.
Okay.
Yep. So if there's no author anywhere or staff or anything, you use the title. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions, you can email me. I'm more than happy to help you. It's jhensley, Hensley, @vinu.edu. My office is here in this building, room 217. But seriously, I'm happy to help you if you need it or want it. If you need me to look something over, if you just have a question about something, please let me know, because I'm happy to help you. So, okay, in the interest of time, I don't want to keep you any longer. I thank you for coming.